a nice walking path around the fortress. 4.2 kilometers, so a bit more than 1 hour with all the breaks because we want to see the spots. But here at Bomarsund they have 3 of these towers in total, and we're only gonna have time to visit one of them, but this is the best one.
Hello, my name is Theo Stjernfeldt and I work as a museum guide here on the Bomarsund Visitor Center. The Visitor Center is a relatively new building which was built just a couple of years ago and opened in 2022, which has been a very good visitors portal to the surrounding fortress ruins area. So yeah, Åland and Finland, as they stand today, was a part of the Swedish Empire until 1808, when Sweden went into war with Russia. Åland and Finland was then lost to Russia, and Åland became the westernmost outpost of the Russian Empire. And this changed the strategic position of Åland, which became a very central and important position in the Baltic Sea. So this prompted the Russians to start building a fortress here. To build this fortress they had to gather manpower and knowledge and workers from around the empire to start build this big fortress. Many of them built houses around the fortress, but there grew a society around the Bomarsund area.
Yeah.
And yeah, the fortress was constructed around 1830 to 1840s.
Did they plan to build a town around here? Or?
They did, yeah, and the town was built simultaneously as the fortress was built. So the society grew alongside the fortress, and they just continued to build upon both until Russia got into war with Great Britain and France.
And this is the beginning of the 19th century?
This was in the middle of the 19th century, yes. So, like I said, the town and the fortress was built around 1840. Most of the parts were done of the fortress and the 3 towers which were built, but the rest were unfinished. And then just 10 years later, around 1853, Russia got into war with the Ottoman Empire, and then the French and the British joined for colonial interests and territorial interests.
Yeah. That was in the Black Sea?
Yeah, around the Black Sea, exactly. So that's the Crimean War.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the French and the British fleet, they sailed into the Baltic Sea also, because they knew there was a fortress here and they knew Russia was so vulnerable around this area. So they sailed around the Baltic Sea and they grouped up around Bomarsund here in Åland. And then that siege of this fortress started in the summer of 1854.
And how long did it continue, the siege? And it was completely destroyed, or how?
Yeah, that's the interesting part, is that the siege itself progressed very quickly. So the first boats, the ships of the French and the British fleet arrived around Åland, the northern parts of Åland and also the southern parts of Åland. And they started scouting the area. They wanted to measure the depth of the water to make sure their warships could come and surround the fortress, ultimately.
There was a British officer who went around.
Yeah, sometimes visited the local people, traded with them, had conversations, asked them about waypoints and stuff like that. So there was some interaction before the siege itself. at the start of the summer, the first warships started bombarding the fortress. And they came around the island of Pesta, and they went in between the Sund, which it was called. And the Russians didn't think warships of the time could get through that sound, but the warships, which were very modern for its time, steamships, managed to get through that sound, and the fortress was surrounded from both sides.
Yeah.
And from the south they started bombarding the main fortress, which could not fire back in return because their guns couldn't fire as far, yeah, exactly. So from the very start of the fighting they were vulnerable and had no real chance of offensively fighting back or defensively fighting back. And then that kind of stalemate progressed throughout the summer until there were around 60 enemy ships in the waters. And 30,000 soldiers totaling in both the navy and the ground troops. And then the ground fighting itself, when the fortress fell into British and French hands, happened very quickly. In fact, only 3 days from the first inland fighting, when they were fighting around the first tower, or the tower that is most western inlands, from the time that tower fell, it was just 3 days until the complete surrender of all the forces. And they were shipped off to Britain and France to prisoner colonies.
Yeah, interesting. So what happened with Åland and with the territories of Finland after they lost this war?
So the territories around Finland were mostly unharmed, and they remained in Russian hands, as did Åland. But Åland, since the fighting had progressed to the stage where it was occupied by French and British forces, they didn't really know what to do with the fortress, so they offered it to Sweden, which their king, Oscar I, declined.
Yeah.
He had some reasons why he wanted to join the war, but he had too many.
It must be in that term. If he had said yes to Åland, it's like a declaring of war to
It could have been, absolutely, yeah. But Sweden was not really willing to join the war alone at that time. And so they didn't, and they declined the offer of the Åland Islands, which ultimately led to the French and the British blowing up the fortress. So they filled the fortress and the surrounding towers with wood and black powder, and they set it alight. And a few days in the start of autumn in 1854, the same year, it was blown to pieces. And the islands were abandoned by the French and the British, but as conditions of their victory in the peace treaty in Paris 2 years later, in 1856, they decided that the Åland Islands were not to be militarized again, and therefore since then on and off Åland has been demilitarized. So that was the origin of Åland's demilitarization.
So when did Åland became a part of Finland?
Åland became a part of Finland officially right around the time of the or right after the Finnish Civil War. Åland was still occupied with the Russian forces, at least in the spring of that year, 1918.
1918.
1918, yeah.
So it was the middle of the Russian Revolution.
Yeah, exactly. And that went on for another couple of years in Russia, but it was over in Finland. And officially, Åland became an autonomous part of Finland 1921, when it was decided also in Paris in the Versailles Peace Treaty that Åland was to be a part of Finland. But then again, a couple of years later, the League of Nations decided that Åland was again to be demilitarized, but remain in Finnish hands as an autonomous part of Finland. So Åland got to have its own sort of government and its own government systems, its own laws and stuff like that, but it still was to be a part of Finland.
Very good, very good. Impressive, I had to say. You know your history.
Thank you.
Yeah.
a lot happened around this area and around this time.
Yeah.
Forwards, and it shaped the future of Åland also in that way.
Yeah. So it's absolutely worth a visit if you come biking or however you decide to come. And you are open already from the 1st of May, I saw.
Yeah, 2nd of May we open, yeah, and we remain open until September. Yeah, we have an exhibit showing sort of the history around the fortress area, showing a little bit of the civilian side, and a few exhibit items and films that you can watch, so it's...
I watched the films inside. I went to the exhibition. It was really good. And very worth a visit.
You felt like you lost Åland now, right?
Yes.
Yeah, if you had been king, you had been claiming Åland, right?
I had claimed Åland. It's a beautiful place.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
How many regions did you say there were? Counties? 15?
16.
16.
And how many we visited?
This is the 6th.
But we skipped one, we skipped Saltvik. And that's also the highest mountain in Åland. Ordas Klint. So... Since you only had 3 days, Stefan. If you had 4, we would have gone up to Saltvik also.
I have to come back.
Yeah.
And continue the ride.
That's the plan. So it's been 3 really good days. This is a museum actually. I didn't realize. Stefan, there's a museum here.
This is the museum.
Yeah, look at the sign there. Telemuseum.
Yes. There's an old telephone cabin.
Yeah.
Telephone hut.
Yeah.
It's a long time ago we had things like that. You can call.
Yeah.
It's a sound.
Yeah, it should be working. But you have to pay, right? With a coin. Do you have any coins? No. Okay. Here you see we're still on this mail route.
Yes.
That we started in Eckerö, at Eckerö Posten Tullhus. So it still continues here and it's gonna continue out in Archipelago also. So.